maybe back door, maybe fall off. Sipping codeine cause I gotta kill a cough. Let me sit sideways in the big Benz. Oh, you boys, they my brothers, they my friends. Now it's time to go to work.
There's not one guy in the history of this program that's bigger than the program.
There's the blitz. Touchdown, Lehman. Touchdown, Oklahoma. Williams got him on the blitz. Lehman on the pick. OU is going to win it again. Peterson's got it. He's got first down and more. High stepping touchdown. Adrian Peterson. To the end zone. Baker Mayfield. Kyler Murray, touchdown. Jalen Hurts, touchdown.
You're listening to Brandon Drumm.
Look, I think the program's moving in a great direction.
And Parker Thune.
Venables knows what he's doing.
This is the OU Insider Under the Visor podcast.
Welcome to another OU Insider Under the Visor Sooners podcast. My name is Brandon Drumm. I'm here with Parker Thune, and you are listening to the OU Insider Under the Visors podcast as a redundant statement. Parker, how you doing, man? I know you've had a busy day. We've all kind of had a busy day. I'm down here in Dallas doing recruiting stuff down here as far as checking out kids and all that type of stuff. How has your day been going? I know Oklahoma's been doing the spring ball. We got stuff. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about obviously the spring game. We're going to talk about Baker Mayfield. We need to talk about Baker Mayfield and some of the comments that he made in his podcast. I watched the whole thing or listened to the whole thing earlier today as well. Which it wasn't as bad as what some of the people are. I'm like, what? I guess I don't get it, but we'll discuss that. We're going to talk about, obviously said, the spring ball, spring game, Baker, the NFL draft, some of the 2022 season. As we want to talk about a sneaky team that people may not be talking about right now, but you might want to start thinking about them. And it's a team that OU fans are always biting their nails when they come up in the schedule.
Ooh, you're drinking the Texas Kool-Aid, huh, Brandon?
Over the last five. Oh, I'm just going off of what's happened to Oklahoma against them in the last 3 or 4 years. Then we're going to talk about hoops and we're going to close this podcast out. But Parker, how you been, man?
Great. Obviously, Oklahoma had a scrimmage today, intra-squad scrimmage, which they've had 2 consecutive Wednesdays now. They had one last Friday as well. So we're starting to be able to piece together, just from talking to sources, talking to people close to the program, Brandon. You and I are kind of starting to be able to piece together a concrete idea of what the lineups are going to look like come the spring game, what the scheme's going to look like come the spring game, generally what Sooners fans can expect when Oklahoma hits the field for that exhibition on April 23rd. And then from there, obviously a ton can change between then and when the Sooners host UTEP on September 3rd to officially open the Brent Venables era. But there's a bit of excitement in the air as we get closer and closer to the spring game in Norman, Oklahoma, and to getting football once again in the Palace on the Prairie.
Yeah, and I think we would be remiss if we didn't say, if you haven't got your tickets, if you have a chance to go down to the game, with Brent Venables calling the fans out, I think it would be wise for OU fans to go to the game. I'm just saying. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. He basically, essentially, and we'll kind of rehash what we talked about in the last podcast and on the live on Monday, YouTube Live on Monday, when we got on there and answered a lot of y'all's questions. If you don't go to OU, is it OU Insider on 247 Sports is on. That's correct. Our YouTube. OU Insider on 247 Sports. Give us a subscribe. You'll get a notice when we go live if you do so, because we go live every Monday at 8 p.m. for you guys, answer questions for you guys. So be sure you do that. But yeah, look, Venables has called the fans out. He called the fans out. He wants them to show up. If they're going to be giving it their all, if they're going to do things for them as far as the Baker Mayfield stuff and all that type of stuff, they want the palace packed because they're bringing in, as a matter of fact, today, just earlier tonight, Kavion Henderson announced that he was going to be coming to Norman for the spring game. So he and I were texting earlier. He went on ahead and tweeted it out. So there's another added 4-star out of the state of Alabama that is going to be in Norman for the spring game on April 23rd. So that is a big deal for Oklahoma, but that's one of many. And we're going to discuss that later on in the podcast. But as far as Oklahoma and what's been going on, kind of the buzz, kind of names that we've been hearing. We always hear Javonte Barnes. We always hear Eric Gray. We hear Javonte Barnes. You hear Dylan Gabriel. I mean, those tend to be the normal names. Theo Weiss, Marvin Mims. We've heard quite a bit.
Another guy whose name we have heard. Yeah, another guy's name we have heard a lot lately on the defensive side of the ball is Kenai Walker. Sounded like the Louisville transfer could be a big-time performer for the Sooners this fall.
Yeah, look, he's long-rangey. He took that photo that I took of him and edited and tweeted it out the other day. And if you haven't, go to his Twitter. I don't know what his Twitter handle is. You can go see it. But it's a really good perspective of just how long this kid is and how big he is. Like, you're talking about a kid that is a legit 6'1", 6'2", 205, probably between 195, 205 pounds. And he looks the part. He looks like an NFL defensive back, cornerback right now. He looks like he could play safety, to be honest. That's how big he is. And when you talk about a guy that has that type of length, and when you add it to Woody Washington, which is another name we continue to hear, Key Lawrence, we continue to hear, has, again, had a good scrimmage today. So did Billy Bowman at the strong safety position. When you have those type of names and those guys are performing well, it kind of, for an inexperienced defensive backfield, for the most part, because think about it, Parker, you got the safety position where almost everybody outside of one or two are sophomores. And then the cornerback position is Woody Washington, DJ Graham, and then a bunch of youngsters. So they're young, but they're super talented. And I think if you're Oklahoma fans, that should give, you should be kind of cautiously optimistic about them. Don't you think?
Yeah, I think cautiously optimistic is probably the right phrase to use with the secondary as a whole, just because, there have been concerns about the secondary every year for the better part of a decade now, Brandon, and every single year, every single offseason, it appears that from an objective standpoint, there's probably more questions in the secondary than at any other position group across the team. And yet we kind of convince ourselves every single offseason that, it's going to be different this time around. That's not to say it's not going to be different in 2022, but that is to say there is something to be said for keeping a foot on the brake to a certain extent with regard to the secondary, particularly with how young they are. Can you expect that there's going to be a step up in terms of the overall ability to tackle and execute assignments under Brent Venables? Sure. But it's also not the type of thing where you can necessarily expect that this is going to be the Legion of Boom in 2022, right? It's one of those deals where we're going to kind of have to see it to believe it with the OU secondary at a certain point in time. And we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves and prognosticating that they're going to be elite. And a lot of these guys in that defensive backfield, I would say, have long-term potential to be outstanding players. Jordan Mukes is a guy that, if it all comes together for him, could be a first-round pick one day. Robert Spears-Jennings, I think so highly of what he brings to the table, and I think he's going to be a contributor sooner rather than later. Billy Bowman's obviously a dynamic athlete, and when you're talking about the corners, you got two really good ones right now in Woody Washington and Kenai Walker. And you got a couple of outstanding transfers in CJ Colden and Trey Morrison, guys that have an NFL ceiling. So there is talent all the way around. And if the Sooners have more struggles in the back end of the defensive backfield in 2022, it's not going to be for lack of talent. But that said, do kind of want to maintain a sense of exactly what you cited, Brandon. That is cautious optimism. You're excited that this might be the year that you start to see the turnaround for Oklahoma in 2022, but you don't necessarily want to cultivate the expectation that all of a sudden it's going to be boom, night and day different than it was a year ago.
Yeah. And I think another thing you can probably add to that is, I guess this would kind of get you out of the cautiously optimistic. I guess you can have both things. I guess you can be cautiously optimistic and still expect more turnovers in a Brent Venables system, because Oklahoma under Venables notoriously the first go round was really good intercepting the ball, forcing fumbles, doing things to really confuse the quarterback. And I fully expect them to do that. Even in year one, I expect that to happen. Now, do I expect it to be a well-oiled machine come September? Not at all. And I think that's something Oklahoma fans need to be realistic about. I think they need to look at that defensive backfield and go, okay, they're better athletes than Oklahoma's had back there in years. So that's a good start. I would venture to say, as far as the mental aspect, you aren't going to find two more mentally prepared and better guys than Patrick Fields and Delarian Turner-Yell. They were special when it came to that. Like, that is one thing they were special mentally. Physically, they had their limitations, and that is something that you don't have in Key Lawrence and Billy Bowman. There's not a lot of physical limitations there. Can they pick everything up mentally? Can they know how to adjust to certain looks in the offense? Can they navigate the rest of the secondary and everybody be on the same page as far as talking go? Because that's one thing about Venables' defense is it is intrinsic. It is deep. It is thorough. And it is confusing. It's not just confusing to the offense. It's confusing to the defensive players. So they're going to have to really, really dial in as far as film watching, and I think that's going to be the difference, is how much film are they going to watch? How much are they going to put their noses into the playbook and really take a look and learn it? Because if they don't, you're going to have busts back there. But at the same time, with their athletic ability, I think you can expect more big plays too. So I think it's kind of a double-edged sword right now for the secondary. As far as the linebackers go, I mean, talk about who you've heard. I think we both know we're probably going to say the same players, but I mean, that's a position that under any Venables defense, you expect really good play no matter who it is. No matter how athletic they are, no matter how smart they are, you still expect them to be really good if they're Brent Venables led defense at the linebacker position. So Parker, who have you heard?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's any secret, and Brent Venables confirmed it with his comments last Friday, that Danny Stutzman is going to be the straw that stirs the drink for that unit. Mm-hmm. There is absolutely no doubt about that. And that doesn't come as a shock to anybody that watched Danny Stutzman play football last year at Oklahoma. No. There's a very legitimate chance that Danny Stutzman could have led the team in tackles if he hadn't gotten hurt last season. And that was playing rather sparingly for most of the year. He was an absolute machine when he was on the field. And given an off season to develop physically under Jerry Schmidt and his direction in the workout room, and just knowing how much of a gym rat Danny Stutzman is, man, there's a lot of excitement surrounding that guy and what he can provide to this defense from the linebacker position in 2022. Outside of him, man, you got a whole bunch of guys that have the potential to contribute. David Igwebu and Deshaun White have both made some plays in their time at Oklahoma. And Jaron Kanik, obviously one of those freshmen that you look at and say, okay, he probably contributes immediately to some extent. Maybe he's on the field 30 snaps a game. Maybe he's on the field 10 snaps a game. Regardless, he's going to be on the field as a true freshman. And Shane Witter is a guy that I think gets lost in the shuffle a little bit, but I am very, very intrigued to see what kind of role he can carve out, because we've heard Jay Valai talk about the cheetah position, right? And the cheetah position amounts to essentially that hybrid linebacker nickel, that position that Isaiah Simmons became synonymous with at Clemson. And it's that role that we have cited as the Isaiah Simmons in Oklahoma's defense. And Jaron Kanak certainly fits that mold, but so too does Shane Witter, who ran the fastest 40-yard dash of anybody on the team when they did testing this winter. So with his combination of size and speed, I'm intrigued to see whether he can unlock some potential that we haven't necessarily seen from him, or that we've only seen in spurts over his first 2 years in Norman. I think he, to me, is the X factor, X factor is probably not the right term. He's the unquantified variable, where if he explodes, I think he adds a ton to that linebacker room.
What about Harrington?
Well, and Harrington's
he's at that cheetah position too.
Yes. And again, that's where you get some crossover between the safeties and the linebackers. And Harrington is a guy that, again, I think he's very much in that same conversation as Shane Witter. If he turns out to be a productive contributor to this defense, it adds a lot, because you know what you're getting in Danny Stutzman. You know what you're getting in Agwebu and Deshaun White. You don't know what you're getting at this point in Justin Harrington and Shane Witter, who, like I said, have shown flashes, but have been relatively inconsistent in the production that they've been able to put together for this football team. So I think it's those guys at that particular position, that cheetah, that can add a lot to this program on the defensive side of the ball, and can, I think, really help push them over the edge from being a good defense to being an elite defense, if you get elite production from that position, whether that is Jaron Kanak or Justin Harrington or Shane Witter or what have you.
Yeah, and I think there's another player that we're not talking about a whole lot right now, and that's because he's not on campus yet. But he fits that mold as far as the size, the speed, the athleticism, and he's a former 4-star in the 2022 class, Jaden Rowe.
Bingo.
I think he has a chance to really change something, and they see that in him. From what I heard, that was literally the thinking whenever Venables showed up. They were going through, according to people I talked to, they were going through, the list of commits, and they were talking about each and every one of them. And they went over and they saw his size, his speed, his athleticism, and they said, "Man, he's playing corner in high school at 6'3", 233 pounds, or 223. I can't remember what it was. It was something. It was between 223 and 33. He's that big of a guy." And Venables is in his head going, "My God, Isaiah Simmons! That's who this guy could be." And so I think instantly that's where he's going to fit. I think that's where they're going to put him in and say, "Learn this position, dude, because if you do, you've got a chance." And talking to Jaden, I got on the phone one day and I asked him, I said, "When you went down there on your official visit, what did they pitch to you? What did they talk to you about?" He said, "Isaiah Simmons. They want me to be the next Isaiah Simmons." And so I think for a guy of his stature, a guy of his frame and athleticism and his speed, and we're talking about a dude who's very similar to Isaiah Simmons in the fact that he runs a 10.4 100, the guy can flat fly. So he's got all the tools physically. Now, does he have the mental capabilities? Does he have the intangibles that Isaiah Simmons? We don't know that yet because he hasn't gotten to campus, but you add him to the mix of Justin Harrington, Shane Witter, Jaron Kanak, and you've got a position there that's loaded with some long, rangy, just super fast players. Every one of those guys that we just named are all sub 4.5 guys. They can flat go. And They've got range. They've got the ability to do things that other people on the field, on the team can't do in the defensive backfield. So I think that is something that OU fans can look forward to. It's different. And as far as you said, like you said, Danny Stutzman, I think he's taken, when he talked to us, he essentially said, I've taken the burden on being the leader now. Like, that's what I want to do. I came into this year. I'm a sophomore. I'm not the new guy. I'm not the puppy. I'm teaching them. Those are my kids now. Like, I'm teaching them everything that I was taught from the Brian Asamoahs of the world, the Nick Benitos, the David Uwegbu's, the Deshaun Whites that took him under their wing last year and taught him. He sees talent in all those guys, like the Kobe McKenzie's, the Jaron Kanaks, and all those guys. So he wants them to be successful as the Kip Lewis's. So I think they all have a chance to be really good players by the time it's all said and done. If you could pick 3 linebackers and okay, you pick the cheetah position and you pick the 2 because in the 4-2-5 essentially, or whatever he decides to run, we'll just pick 2 linebackers. We'll go to the 4-2-5. Or you could pick 3 if they go through 3, because obviously Venables isn't strict. He's multiple now, but let's just do 2 linebackers in the cheetah. Who do you see starting?
That's tough. I'm going to say right now, Danny Stutzman, David Ugwoegbu. I'll give him the slight edge over to Deshaun White. And then your cheetah. Man, that's tough, because I really am tempted. I think I will go with Justin Harrington. I'll go with Justin Harrington at the cheetah position. And
he's come back in and saved the day, huh?
He's been really good from everything we've seen and everything we've heard. And again, like I think that will change. I think my opinion on that will change. And I anticipate the dynamic at that position will change between now and September 3rd. But between him,
we didn't even talk about him.
TD Roof. No.
And he's had a really good spring too.
I take it back. I'll go with Jaren Kanak. I mean, it's kind of hard to deny the physical traits that he brings to the table. And I love Justin Harrington as an athlete, but man, there's just something special about Jaren Kanak. And like I said, he's going to see the field. Whether he starts or not, he's going to see the field. And I think he has a higher ceiling than Shane Witter. I think he has a higher ceiling than Justin Harrington. It's all about grasping things mentally for any freshman. And as long as Jaren Kanak can do that, he, without question to me, regardless of whether he starts or not, I think he has the most potential to truly make a difference at that position, to be a true difference maker from the cheetah position. So, man, I'm really excited to see him in action come April 23rd, probably as much so as any player on the defensive side of the football. But yeah, although my first instinct was to go with Justin Harrington, I do think, and in continuing to talk to people about Justin Harrington, it's clear that there's still some trust that he has to earn back from everybody.
Yep.
Even his peers. And so for that
he's doing
reason,
a good job.
Yeah, he is doing a good job. But for that reason, I will go ahead and roll with Jaren Kanak.
So I'm with you on. I'm with you on Stutzman. I'm with you on Uwegbu. Part of me, but I'm going to say this. I want to add this. No matter who starts at the linebacker position, I think TD Roof and just Deshaun White play a significant amount of reps and snaps during the season. I just go ahead.
No, I'll just add this. I think TD Roof is probably the one guy on defense that we might not be talking about enough, because the reality in Brent Venables' defense is, as we have said many times on this podcast, Brandon, it's far more about being able to execute your assignment reliably than it is about your physical traits and your physical ceiling. And so while I do think Jaren Kanak will get there mentally, if he doesn't, it's somebody like TD Roof that is going to stand to benefit.
Yep. Yeah. And obviously at that cheetah position, I'm with you with Jaren Kanak. And that's why I kind of, when you said Justin Herring to begin with, I was like, man, he's already earned everybody's trust back, huh? Like in my head. So, and now, folks, we're talking spring. Come fall, if he's dominated during the summer reps and stuff, come fall, we could have this completely different conversation right now and be going, Justin Harrington's that guy. And we could be doing the same thing with TD Roof and David Uwegbu. It could really be Danny Stutzman, TD Roof, and Justin Harrington as your guys as far as that cheetah position goes. So there is a lot to unpack here. There's going to, and also you need to understand, there's going to be position movements. There's going to be a lot of movements. I bet you come the spring game, even over the next few weeks, before we get done talking about this, before this podcast gets old and out of date, and it'll be out of date within a week, because there's going to be movements of position then. Like there's going to be guys moving around, changing positions. You're going to see players in the spring game playing multiple positions because they're trying to find fits going into the fall and summer, because they want them to be, okay, this is what they played best at, and now we're going to roll with them at this position throughout the rest of the way. And that's kind of where their mindset is. But okay, let's move on to the defensive line spot. I mean, we've heard a ton of good things about Jordan Kelly. We've heard a ton of good. I keep hearing. I spoke to a person just the other day that said, "Look, because okay, I heard about Jordan Kelly playing well, but it was from one person. Venables goes out and says it publicly. Jordan Kelly, he's kind of that guy right now. He's probably graded out the best. So I make a few phone calls to a man. Everybody goes, Jordan Kelly, Jalen Redmond, and Jefferson have just played really well. And those three on the interior have been just different than everybody else. So I said, what about Josh Wallace? And they said, yes, he's learning the position. Athletically, he's going to get it. He's going to be really good. They feel really comfortable right now, from what I understand, with the interior defensive linemen. Like they feel like they've got something there, and good enough that they can play at a high level at that position. I think similarly, they feel that way with the starters at the edge. Now, as far as, rotation and all that, you got Stripling. You're going to have, I'm trying to think of somebody else. You're going to have Brendan Walker. You're going to have Clayton Smith. But I think they feel like there's maybe they need to go after, if they were going to do something in the portal, I think edge would be the place that they would go and try to do something on the defensive side of the ball right now. That's just my guess, because I feel like they feel really good about the front two. I don't know if you've heard the same thing, but as far as like the rotation goes, I think they feel like they need a little bit more depth there on the edge, but I think they feel decent to good about the depth right now as far as the interior defensive line.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear that there are going to be, I think Jordan Kelly's emergence just goes to show you that there are going to be a lot of guys that are ready to play and ready to contribute among the interior defensive linemen for Oklahoma, because we know what Oklahoma is getting in Jalen Redmond and Jeffrey Johnson. We know those guys can produce. We know those guys can be game wreckers on the interior. Add Jordan Kelly to the mix, and then you throw in Josh Ellison, Corey Roberson, Isaiah Coe. There's a ton of quality depth there. Every one of those guys has played a lot of ball at the University of Oklahoma. And I think your meal tickets are going to be Jalen Redmond and Jeffrey Johnson. And if Jordan Kelly continues to progress like we're hearing he has, then maybe he pushes Johnson for that starting spot next to Redmond. Maybe that becomes a battle that we're watching heading into opening day on September 3rd. regardless, I think whatever you're rolling with as your two starters on the interior defensive line, there's going to be a lot of confidence in those guys, because when you have that much quality depth and you have that much quality competition, you know that whoever wins the job won it because they earned it.
Yeah, look, Jeffrey Johnson is a player that when he showed up for Tulane and just torched the Oklahoma offensive line in game 1 last year, that was kind of his, welcome out party to the nation. And there's a lot of people within that program at OU right now that feel like he's got a chance to be just that dude. Like him and Jalen Redmond can be that dude. Now, as far as like I said, grading out, Jordan Kelly's done the best grading out, but big play potential, you're going to be hard pressed to find two better interior guys as far as big play goes between Jeffrey Johnson and Jalen Redmond. On the outside, Ethan Downs, Jonah Lulu is going to be just, they're going to be good. They're going to be really good. Those two are just cat quick. Marcus Stripling's going to make plays. That's what he's done at Oklahoma when given the chance. I think they need to find out what they can do. Brendan Walker had a chance to be really good when he was that stand-up edge guy. I loved what Oklahoma did with him under Grinch. And he made plays.
You remember when he broke into the rotation as a true freshman?
He made plays.
He wasn't playing a lot. But when he was playing, he was kind of in the same situation as Marcus Stripling. That year, he wasn't seeing the field a whole heck of a lot. But when he did, man, he did make plays. And he made good plays. He beat people. He blew up the backfield. And so I think he's one of those guys that people tend to forget about because he dealt with that injury last year and was just completely out of the mix for so long. But is Brendan Walker one of those guys that maybe we're not talking about enough heading into 2022?
It may be. I know there's one guy, and it's weird to say, the 5-star is the one everybody's kind of like, is he going to put on weight? And I think that's something everybody's waiting to see is, will Clayton Smith put on weight? Will he do what he needs to do as far as the weight goes? And if he can do that, then, more power to him. I think he's going to have a chance to be that guy, but he's going to have to put on weight to do that. Let's talk about the offensive line. We do this all the time. We talk about what we expect. What have you been hearing as far as the offensive line goes lately?
I mean, look, I've made it no secret from the get-go. I expect that your starting offensive line is going to consist of Anton Harrison and Wanye Morris as your tackles, McCade Metayer and Chris Murray as your guards, and then Andrew Rame as your center. And I think if anybody beats out any of those five, kind of like we were talking about with the interior defensive linemen, man, they really earned that. Because to me, there's not a whole lot of mystery surrounding the offensive line. Like I will legitimately be surprised if the starting rotation consists of anything other than those five. You maybe have a case for Robert Conjul, the 6th-year senior. I mean, he's made his living at Texas A&M and Arizona and at Oklahoma, for that matter, on beating out guys that ostensibly are more physically gifted than he is. So maybe he pushes Andrew Rame, and we talked last week on the podcast about just how vital the cognitive aspect of playing the center position is. So maybe that's a battle. Maybe that turns into a battle. Maybe Robert Conjul supplants Andrew Rame, who assumed starting center duties midseason last year. And were it not for that injury that he suffered against Iowa State, would have continued to hold down that role for the remainder of the season. I think it's going to be Andrew Rame. That's where my money lies. But I guess that's maybe the one position where I can see Robert Conjul getting in there and shaking things up.
Yeah, I'm with you. Everything that you just said, look, I totally agree. I think I said this last week. Conjul was the one person I'm sitting there going, he could be that starter. And if Rame becomes that starter, could Conjul supplant one of Chris Murray at the guard position potentially? Because I think that's not out of the realm of possibility. And I want people to understand that we're also hearing buzz about Aaron Parks. I mean, Aaron Parks at the tackle spot. I mean, he's got a chance to be that rotation guy. So I think Beanbo has probably 7, 8, 9 guys that he's going to feel relatively comfortable with at playing. I don't know that he's going to be able to go 10 deep. And I think that's not, but we also don't know that because we don't know what Jake Taylor and Jacob Sexton are going to do when they get to Norman.
Bingo.
Now, if they come in and they play like they have the potential to play, I think you could go 10 or 11 deep, and now you feel really comfortable if you're Bill Beanbo. But I think you're not going to know that until you get into July and August. I think that's really where you're going to start thinking, okay, maybe I feel a little bit comfortable with where they are, the headspace, the mental aspect of what they're doing offensively. And those two kind of have the strength to be able to do and really work it out. I know both have been working really hard and have been doing the things during the offseason to help them get to that point. Now, when they get there, do they grasp the things? Because they're going to throw everything in the kitchen sink at them when they get there and say, got to grasp this really quick. It's going to be, what do you say? They need to learn it hook or by crook type deal.
Yes.
Is that
there you go.
Running back, I think we both agree that, I mean, Marcus Major's been kind of dinged up a little bit again, unfortunately. But prior to that, it was Marcus Major and Javonte Barnes they were banging heads to see who was going to be that next guy in line behind Eric Gray. And now it looks like Javonte Barnes is kind of separating himself a little bit just by injury. That doesn't mean that Marcus Major isn't going to be able to make a comeback and be able to get in that rotation and do what he needs to do. But every time you miss a practice with a talent like Javonte Barnes is a time that you give him a chance to separate himself more and more. And eventually he's going to start nipping at the heels of Eric Gray. And that's going to be the interesting part, because this is Eric Gray's final year. And in his mind, it's not his final year, but in his mind, he wants it to be his final. Which
is understandable.
Now or never. Yeah, it's now or never NFL for him in his mind. And he's going into the season doing that. I will say this. Everything that you hear of Eric Gray is he's been nothing but a leader. He's been nothing but great to these young guys, teaching them the ropes. And because of that, you see a more well-rounded running back room. So, Parker, on your end, what have you heard?
It's interesting, Brandon, that, we talk to so many people on a day-to-day basis that are close to the program, that get to observe all of the work that they're doing far more up close and personal than we do as members of the media. And there is one guy that has been brought up by literally every single person I've talked to for the last 2 to 3 weeks. And he comes out of that running back room. It's not Eric Gray. It's not Marcus Major. It's not even Javonte Barnes, though folks have had nothing but glowing things to say about Javonte Barnes. A guy that I have heard a ton of praise for from multiple different people is Tawee Walker, man. The walk-on out of Las Vegas. And his story, for those that are unfamiliar with it, is just unbelievable. And he's one of those guys that you just can't help but root for. And you find yourself hoping that everything we've been told about the type of player he's demonstrated that he is in spring practice holds true, because he went virtually unrecruited out of high school as a safety, spent a year at a post-grad football institution on the East Coast, spent the next year completely out of football, then re-enrolled at Palomar Junior College as a running back. And then all he did was rush for 1,000 yards in 8 games and start to register on the radar for a whole bunch of FCS and Group of 5 institutions. And DeMarco Murray ended up making a call because he wanted to bring in another running back. I guess reached out to a few of his connections in the Las Vegas area and said, hey, find me the best JUCO running back from Vegas. And that was how they ended up stumbling upon Tawi Walker, who is lifelong friends with Ramondre Stevenson. He wears Stevenson's number 29, by the way, and you can't help but notice a certain similarity to Ramondre Stevenson in the way that Tawi Walker plays the game. And that's been echoed by everybody we've talked to, is like the buzzword surrounding his play is bowling ball. He's straight downhill. He'll go crashing into you. He's completely unafraid to absorb contact. He's small. He's thick. He's sawed off. He's probably not much taller than 5'9", but he is stout. He's sturdy. And there are people within that program, Brandon, who believe that Tawi Walker might see meaningful carries in 2022. And that is not to say he will supplant Eric Gray or Javonte Barnes, because I don't want to get anything twisted. The backfield is going to belong to those two this fall. I don't think there is any question about that. And if a third guy breaks into the rotation, I think most have been under the expectation that it's going to be Marcus Major. But I wonder if it ends up being Tawi Walker. I also wonder if he's the type of guy that starts to see action near the goal line, if he is really the bowling ball type of back that we've been led to believe he is. And if you've seen him in practice, he certainly looks the part. Now, again, just for the sake of clarification here, Eric Gray and Javonte Barnes are the clear 1-2 on this depth chart, according to everyone that I've spoken with. That is unanimous across the board, and I don't think there's any doubt that those two are going to be the guys this fall. But, man, it's just – it really is striking to me that a walk-on, of all people, is somebody that just ends up getting brought up out of the blue when I talk to folks about who's standing out in spring practice thus far. Mm-hmm. That's not even something I angle for or try to prompt. It's just, all of a sudden, hey, Tawi Walker looks really, really good. So for a walk-on to be making the type of impression that guy is thus far, it's impressive.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about him for a couple of weeks now and continue to hear buzz about him. I think, a guy that's kind of got lost in the shuffle because he's not on campus yet is Gavin Salchuk.
Yep.
And who's to say he's not going to come in and shake the trees? He could shake a few leaves, and next thing you know, he could be in that rotation, because when we're talking speed, if you're talking somebody that can really, really change things up, that guy can change things up, because when he gets out in space, when he gets just a little bit of daylight, it's 88 and out the gate for that guy. He's got special speed, and we don't know what he's going to do when he gets to campus, because we don't know how he hasn't even gone through anything with Schmidt yet. So once he gets that added weight, maybe adds 10 pounds to his frame between June and August, and next thing you know, you've got a chance to have a guy that's, 195, 200 pounds and runs a Colorado or whatever record 60-yard dash and 40. I mean, the guy's just freakishly fast. So I think the talent that they've accumulated at that running back position is downright just really good. I think if there wasn't high expectations at that position, I think that's one position you can for sure look to and go, you expect a lot out of that position. Would you agree with that?
Oh, of course.
Yeah. And that's not something we could really say. I mean, you thought Kennedy Brooks, you thought Eric Gray was going to be good in the last few years, but outside of those two, you didn't have a lot of, answers. Now it goes 4 or 5 deep, and you're thinking, if they lose one, they've got 3 or 4 more that can just hop in and supplant them and keep that train rolling. And that's not something we've seen in the Oklahoma backfield in a while. So I think that's a different niche right there. Wide receiver. I think we both agree that we think that they're probably going to try to go find somebody in the portal just to add a little bit more depth there. And I've heard that through, people I've talked to and stuff like that. Like that's on the mind of people around the program, but they still have some really good talent there. I mean, it's young. It's a lot of inexperience outside of Stoops and maybe Theo Weiss and obviously Marvin Mims, but the talent's there. Like they've got some talent there. I mean, when you look at it, Jalil Farouk, you keep hearing that name, and I keep having people tell me if there's one guy that is going to be that dude at the wide receiver position, everybody keeps saying Jalil Farouk. He's going to have a breakout year, people. It's going to break out year. And they keep talking about his speed and his athleticism and his explosiveness. And when he gets out in space, he's really, really hard to tackle. And not just that, he has great body control. So when he goes up to get the ball in high points, they love that about him. The starting at the wide receiver position, would it shock you to see Theo Weiss, Marvin Mims, Jalil Farouk, Drake Stoops? Would that be your 4 to start the year?
Certainly be my 4, without question. To me, there's a clear gap between those 4 and the rest of the room. And that's not to say that somebody like Jaden Gibson or Brian Darby doesn't eventually work their way into the conversation. But
Cody Jackson.
I feel like, Cody Jackson's another guy and people forget about him too, because he made some really nice plays at the beginning of last season before that medical issue sidelined him. But to me, your clear top tier is Weiss, Mims, Farouk, Drake Stoops.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I think it's pretty set in stone. I think they have decent depth. I think it's young. I just think they want another guy that can come in that they feel really comfortable with to rotate in, that is going to add some leadership, add some experience into that depth that they don't have behind kind of the first 4 or 5 guys. I think that's kind of what they're looking for right now. Tight end wise, I think Braden Willis, that he's had a magnificent spring from what I've heard, just dominated. I've also heard, Caden Helms has had a really good spring. So do you think Llewellyn ends up at offensive tackle? Like, do you think there's a chance that happen? Okay, I agree.
Yes.
I agree. I've kind of heard buzz on that may be where the thing's going.
As have I.
So
that may happen from what I'm hearing rather soon.
That's not to say that he's not, because he is. He's got the ability to do things at the tight end position. I just think they see him being able to put on weight and just being a magnificent. They think he could be a superstar at the tackle position, actually, because of his athleticism and his frame. Who else have you heard? What are some of the things you've heard at the tight end spot?
Yeah, well, exactly what you just mentioned, Brandon, which is that, and you used the proper word with Braden Willis, because he has had a magnificent spring from everything I've been told. And man, I feel like we said it even before last season was concluded, Brandon, that the 2 dudes at that position the following year in Jeff Lebby's offense were going to be Braden Willis and Caden Helms. And I believe that. I'm curious to see what happens with Daniel Parker. Because he has, from what I've seen of him in practice, he is a lot more of a pass catcher than I think we were sold on him being.
He's smoother than I thought he was going to be.
He is really smooth. And so he is probably strictly an inline guy. Like, I don't think Daniel Parker is going to be splitting out wide all that much, if at all. But I am curious to see what kind of role he carves out. I do think Jason Llewellyn ends up at offensive tackle. And with the type of athlete that he is and how well he moves for his size, if he plays tight end, great. If he plays offensive tackle, great. Him moving to offensive tackle is not at all a referendum on his skills, because anybody who's watched him play tight end, it's not that difficult to conclude that, okay, yeah, this guy's really good. He's a
He's
really
also
good
one of the
pass
best deep
catcher,
snappers.
and he's very athletic. And but
He
you
can
also
deep snap too.
yeah, maybe that's his role after Casey Kelleher graduates in 2023. So all that to say, I think the other thing you have to look at, though, when you're talking about Jason Llewellyn is the frame, right? He's 260 pounds right now, and he's only going to get bigger. And he's very clearly got the room on his frame to get bigger. And so when you have the potential to have a very special offensive lineman on your hands, if you take that route with Jason Llewellyn, that makes that path a little bit more alluring. So I would expect that that is what will ultimately happen with him. It will be very interesting for me to see what ends up happening with that tight end room in the class of 2023 and who they recruit at that position, because I know OU is high on Marcus Dixon out of Philadelphia, kind of trying to gauge interest there on Dixon's end. He has not visited campus yet and doesn't have any concrete plans to that we know of. What we do know and what we did report last week was that Jackson McGowan, who's a 3-star tight end and very much cut from the same cloth as Caden Helms, is going to visit for the spring game. And he is currently committed to Cincinnati, but that commitment, from what I'm told, is not going to stick. Had a good conversation with Jackson, I believe, last Friday, and he said, yep, I'll be there at the spring game. I'm expecting to get that Oklahoma offer, and we'll see where things go. Now, if Oklahoma does offer, which is the expectation at this time, that instantly becomes McGowan's biggest offer to date. That is the most prestigious offer he will have on his offer sheet. The interesting thing to me will be to see whether Ohio State pulls the trigger, because I know for a fact that they are keeping close tabs on him as well. And so if Ohio State gets involved, maybe that's the fly in the ointment as far as Oklahoma's recruitment of Jackson McGowan. The way I look at it, it's going to be hard to keep him away from Norman unless the Buckeyes get involved. And when the Buckeyes get involved, that's probably where things get hairy for OU. So I think the hope as far as that recruitment goes is that he likes his experience in Norman and that Ohio State continues to keep him warm, continues to stay in touch, but never actually pulls the trigger on the offer. Because hey, you flip on the tape with Jackson McGowan, man, he is an exciting football player. That hybrid wide receiver tight end, exactly what Caden Helms was going into his senior year of high school. And they are eerily similar on tape. So he is in line to be the next Caden Helms if OU does offer him, pursue him, and end up getting his signature.
So we both think that the tight end position's in good hands right now. That's kind of the long story short there. So, how about the QB? I think we both, Dylan Gabriel. He's leading the team. He's doing really well. There's not a whole lot to talk about at quarterback position. I think, and I know fans are going to be like, wait, what? There's not a lot to talk about with quarterbacks? That doesn't make any sense. Well, here's the deal. You know who the starter is. Levy came out and said that before the damn spring even started. So you don't even have to worry about that. Now, what you do have to think about is who's going to be the backup. And we don't know because we've heard some up and down things about all the backup quarterbacks. It's either heard some really things and we've heard some good things. So it's been a roller coaster spring as expected for two young guys in Ralph Rucker and Nick Evers. That said, I still think Oklahoma tries to go find somebody else to come in and alleviate that backup spot for at least a season or two, potentially. And then they'll roll with Evers or Jackson Arnold down the road, but they need to find somebody for that 2023 season, in particular because Venables kind of Freudian slip, and I've heard the same thing, that 2023 could be the season that they end up in the SEC. So There is that. Because if you do the math, Venables kind of said next year when we end up in the SEC, and then he backtracked and kind of said, a few years down the line. Did you hear that, Parker? When he did that?
Yes.
Yeah. And then I spoke to a couple of sources, because remember I said it the other day when I was speaking to a couple of sources. I told it may have been the last podcast. I've heard 18 months. They will be in the SEC in 18 months. Folks, if you do the math, and I was told that a month ago, if you do the math on it, that's September of 2023.
Yep.
That is the SEC. So we'll see if that really happens. We're not reporting that as fact. We're just saying if that is the case, you kind of want Dylan Gabriel to be around for one more year. You kind of need him. Well, you're going to be going into that with Jackson Arnold and Nick Evers as your starters as freshmen. You really don't want that, to be honest with you. Like, they both have high ceilings. They both have a chance to be really good. But to throw them in through the fire like that, just go ahead, bro. Do your thing. After 1 year, that's rough, man. Like, and you want to know what? I was talking to some people about Evers the other day, and the one thing people always told me, they said, the one thing, you aren't going to outwork him. He works his butt off for everything that he does. So I will never say that a kid won't do well put in that position, but that is a lot to throw on people that haven't been in that conference. Like, it's your first year as a program in that conference, and you roll out a freshman, a redshirt freshman potentially. That could be a rough go. Now, here's the thing. Evers has a high enough ceiling that he could shock us.
Sure.
So could Jackson Arnold. But if you had your choice and you're Brent Venables and Jeff Levy, you would want Dylan Gabriel to come back one more year, would you not?
I would think so.
Yeah.
I would think so. And
that's not the hypothetical. That's a hypothetical that they're in the SEC. Now, if they're in the Big 12 again, you roll out Nick Evers and stuff like that, I think you feel a little bit more comfortable, right? So,
yeah, certainly. To me, it all depends on how Nick Evers develops, and we'll know a lot more about his future a year from now in spring practice than we do right now, because everybody hits a wall.
He's going to be great.
Oh yeah, everybody hits a wall as a true freshman, though. It happens to every single player. And for some, it happens quicker than others. Some guys get through the wall very quickly. For some, it takes a while. And there are some guys in past years, Brandon, that we've heard really good things about the second they get to campus, and then boom, they hit that wall, and it sets them back quite a while. And there are guys that push through that wall, and they end up being contributors in year one, just like we initially prognosticated. And so I don't think that if you are going into SEC competition in 2023 with Nick Evers as your quarterback, it is the worst thing in the world. But in the midst of a transition like that, I think you were definitely better served to have a guy like Dylan Gabriel at the controls, who has played or will have played at that point 4 years of college football. That gives you a much greater degree of comfort as a coaching staff and as a fan base.
Yeah, I mean, look, you want that. You want a guy with experience. I think Nick Evers has a chance, like I've said over and over and over, like he's got a chance to be a damn good quarterback at the University of Oklahoma. But that transition year, I mean, that's the scary part, is like you're going in as a collective unit to something you've never done before in an experience in a week in and week out juggernaut that you've never done before, and it would be with a freshman quarterback. Now, he could shock the living crap out of us and be just the second coming of Sam Bradford as a freshman, redshirt freshman. And that doesn't shock me, because I remember the things we heard about Sam Bradford during the early portions of his time at Oklahoma. You heard some, it's kind of up and down. It's up and down. But then at the end of the year, he skyrocketed and developed like nobody's business. And he's in there competing with Nichols. I can't remember the guy's name. But he ended up at Michigan State, ended up playing wide receiver when it was all said and done. But that's my point, is that he was competing with essentially a guy that ended up playing wide receiver at Michigan State at the end of his college career. So the difference is like, I guess you could see it. You can see the athleticism that Evers has. You can see that potential. If he can reach that in 1 year, you're golden. You feel great about what you're going to do. I think that's the thing. Like you said, 1 year from now, we're going to know the difference between the good and kind of maybe shaking your head going, I don't know if that's a good thing or not type deal. So we'll see. Let's move on to recruiting. Lots of good things going on. I was actually at Allen High School yesterday.
Please tell me Michael Hawkins is visiting for the spring game, Brandon.
Potentially, yes. They have taken notice. They have taken notice of him. There's a lot of people around Allen that think Oklahoma is eventually going to pursue Michael Hawkins. He won the
yes,
MVP
Lord,
at the
yes, and
Rivals
amen.
camp. Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about this for a while. Like, I saw him a while back. I pointed him out to you. You went and saw him at the Under Armour camp, got to know him a little bit. We're kind of the presidents and vice presidents of the Michael Hawkins fan club.
I tell you what, I am not going to
2024 quarterback.
If he ends up committing to the University of Oklahoma, I am not going to shut up for the next 2 years about how I was the first person on the 24/7 Sports Network to write about that kid, because, and I didn't even know at the time that he had any connection to OU. I didn't know his dad played cornerback at OU in the early 2000s.
So you wrote him before I went down there and visited him during the season? Really? Yep. Interesting. Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Man,
and I knew it. I knew who he was. So, I mean, that's why I kind of went down there. So,
yeah. Well, and again, like as we've continued to point out every single time we have the conversation about Michael Hawkins, there's only been one guy before Michael Hawkins that ever played quarterback at Allen High School at the varsity level as a sophomore. Most everybody listening should know who that guy was. Yeah. And when that's the company you're in, Brandon, that's your first indication that in Michael Hawkins, you got something pretty special on your hands.
Yeah, no, and they think the world of him. I was talking to Coach Morris yesterday. They think he has a chance to just be utterly special. As a matter of fact, he was like, look, we're missing some offensive line that graduated. We're going to miss some defensive line guys because, DJ Hicks is going down to Katie Pato or Pato, whatever. And he essentially turned to me and he goes, but we have that guy, and that guy will help us get through a lot of issues. And he was pointing towards Michael Hawkins Jr. And so 2024 4-star, potentially 5-star quarterback out of Allen, Texas, threw for 2,800 yards last year as a sophomore, led them to the state semifinals, and ran for, I think, over 1,000 yards as well. Threw for, I think he had a total of 30-something touchdowns or maybe more than that. I mean, he had a great stat line as a sophomore. And they expect him to have a massive season in 2022. And if you watch and see what he's done during this offseason, he's done nothing but be at the Elite 11. Like, if you were to go and talk about the top QBs at the Elite 11, 2023, you would probably sit there and say Jackson Arnold and the Baylor QB commit. You would have 2024, you would have Michael Hawkins Jr., and 2025 would be Kevin Sperry Jr. out of Prosper Rock Hill. So those were your four guys that really stood out at that Elite 11 in Dallas, that regional. And I think Oklahoma, I know he's going to come up for the camp. He says that they're talking that Venables follows him, Levy follows him. There's a lot of buzz surrounding Michael Hawkins, so we'll see where that goes. There's potential that he could end up visiting. Obviously, Umeazulu will also potentially visit during the spring game. If they do visit, they're going to come up together. So that would be big news for Oklahoma if they could make that happen. On the other front, obviously, David Hicks' father is still the principal, or one of the principals at Allen High School. I talked to him for a good hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half yesterday. I love where Oklahoma stands there. I went in it thinking A&M was the leader. I walked away going, I might actually be picking Oklahoma right now. Like, that's kind of how I
drop
feel
the
as far
crystal
as,
ball, Brandon. Drop
yeah,
it.
no, I'm not there.
You know you want
The
to.
thing, here's why I say that is the relationship that they have with that OU staff. He kept reiterating to me, he's like, look, they don't pressure us. They don't talk to us like that. They don't do a lot of things that some staffers do. They just treat us the way they treat us. And we've known them longer than we've known anybody else. And that's kind of where the relationship goes. His father literally told me our best relationship is, or the strongest relationship or the longest relationship we've had is with the Oklahoma staff and Coach Page. So there's that. Now, that said, A&M is going to be hard to beat. Like, I don't want anybody to get that twisted. I'm not predicting him to go to Oklahoma right now. I'm just saying I think Oklahoma's in a really good position. I think they may have a slight lead there. That was shocking to me that I walked away with that. He's visiting Oregon on the 23rd. This weekend, he's going to visit Michigan State. They like Michigan State okay. They like Oregon okay. But at the end of the day, it does feel like it's going to end up being an Oklahoma and A&M battle. So we'll see about that. I'm here to tell you that there is trying to think of the other kid's name, Devin Mitchell. He's a 2025 tight end at Allen, and he's got a potential to be a 5-star. Literally,
Wow.
If you saw the kid, I watched him move. I watched him lift. I watched him run. I've watched him at the Under Armour camp. He was one of the few 2025 kids that they invited. He's special. 6'5", 215, 20 pounds, built like he's a junior or senior. He's 14 years old, almost 15. Freak of nature. So he's another name to watch. File that away. Devin Mitchell, tight end for Allen, Texas. Another name that Oklahoma fans need to kind of file away is CJ Allen, linebacker out of Georgia. I think you wrote about him the other day. I know his coach, Coach Toomer, really well. He actually was the coach for Trey Sermon when they were at Marietta back in the day. And now he coaches CJ Allen. And I think they're visiting on June the 10th. Is that correct? June the 10th?
June 10th.
Yep. They're going to Georgia first, then Oklahoma on the 10th. So obviously Georgia's going to be tough to beat, but there's some history there with Oklahoma and some of the staffers around him that I think Oklahoma has a decent shot to actually win that battle at the end of the day. That's not something I would say publicly a lot, but that's one that you can kind of feel like, and the relationship that they have is pretty strong with the Oklahoma staff. So we'll see where it goes from there. But there's a lot of things going on with the spring game. There's some big visitors coming on. So we'll have that list up for you guys on the OU Insider VIP board within the next, week or so. We've got a list going. We've already put, we always want to wait kind of the week before, because sometimes you'll start throwing these names up and then things happen. So if you can get them to reconfirm the week of, that's when we start throwing stuff up, because it helps. Like Derek LeBlanc's kind of wishy-washy right now. He was coming in. He was going to be there for another 3 or 4 days. But with the inflation, I'm here to tell folks it's hard for these kids to get to places right now. It's expensive. So we'll see how that turns out. One thing is guaranteed, they are coming on unofficial May 31st. They've already got the tickets and stuff, May 31st through June the 5th. So that is guaranteed for Derek LeBlanc. And I do want to add this. Everybody keeps hitting me up about Derek LeBlanc. Like, I got PMs from Florida fans and all kinds of stuff. He's not going to Oklahoma. I'm like, I never said he was. I predict, it's a prediction in freaking March, folks. Chill out. Like, I'm just guessing. Like, and I even wrote that. I'm guessing. So it's weird, man. I was like, dude, Florida is right up there at the top. I mean, chill out, folks. But to think these people think that Oklahoma has like zero shot. And I know Blake Alderman's told them, yeah, they got a good shot. Yeah, they just don't go visit these teams for no reason. So they're wide open to a lot of different people. I think that's what people need to understand. Like, they just spent 3 days in Knoxville, Tennessee. They're going to go back to Florida and Miami and to Oklahoma and to a couple other places. Like, they're wide open. People need to relax. Relax. Nobody's predicting anything. July 23rd is a long ways away. Deep breaths, folks. Anyways, all right, go ahead. Go ahead, Parker. You get your recruiting nuts out. Go for it.
Oh, well, no, I mean, look, we're all looking to the spring game as the next big day for Oklahoma. And you'd have to say probably the one headliner right now is Nigel Smith, the 5-star defensive lineman in the 2024 class, who was just on campus last month and very quickly made plans to return. Things are moving in a solid direction for Oklahoma there. Jalen Kilgore, another guy that is going to be in town from the state of Georgia for the spring game. We'll have a full list up next week on OU Insider VIP up on the board for all of our paying members. But look, just like we had on March 5th and March 26th, we're going to end up with, I would say, probably minimum 25 guys, 25 nationally ranked guys between the 2023 and 2024 classes. And you're going to get some 2025s mixed in. Emil Picarella, 2025 quarterback out of the state of Mississippi. He's going to be in Norman. And so that may be another guy that whose name you file away in the 2025 class as somebody that might earn an offer around this time next year when Oklahoma ends up dishing out their offers to prospects in the class of 2025. Look, I think
real quick, because you were talking 2025, just because it hit my head when you said that. Edmond Memorial quarterback, 2025 quarterback, David McCombs was in town. We reported this last week on OU Insider. We actually talked about it on the last podcast, but he's probably going to be going to a camp at Oklahoma. And that's a guy I think that has a chance to be arguably the best quarterback to come out of the state in a long time. And so just kind of think about that, file that one away a little bit, because I know I said this the other day, but there's a chance that Oklahoma doesn't have to leave within a 3-hour radius to get their quarterback, because the 2025 quarterbacks within the state of Oklahoma and North Texas are just stacked. Like, it is stacked right now.
The talent across the state of Oklahoma in general in 2025 is stacked. Right?
Insane.
I mean,
after 24 being so bad, yeah.
That may be one of the best classes that the state has ever had.
Preceded by one of the worst.
That's true. You know, people ask me all the time, like, who should we be looking out for in the class of 2024 in the state of Oklahoma? And I'm just like, can Nigel Thomas? Like, that's really it. Now that David Stone left, I mean, there are just not all that many dudes in the class of 2024. But yeah, you look at the 25s, man, the Sooner State runs deep with studs. And
yes,
you can expect that Ravion Larry is going to have an Oklahoma offer, I would think, very, very soon upon the completion of his first semester of his sophomore year, once Oklahoma gets to the point where they can officially offer, per the Brent Venables protocol, prospects in the class of 2025. So Ravion Larry, you would think, is probably one guy that they'll pull the trigger pretty early on. Caden Knighton's obviously already visited. David McComb. I mean, if you saw the visit pictures, that looks like a grown man.
Ryan Grayson.
Brandon.
Yeah.
David McComb looks like a grown man.
Mm-hmm.
And to think that he's got 3 more years of high school football before he ever steps on a college campus, man, he does have the potential to be truly special. You know who else was on campus today? Brandon, a guy that I'm pretty sure you name dropped last week on the podcast, Markell Johnson.
Yes, he was. Yeah, he was. 2023 athlete. And that it's funny we say all that, but you have the 2023 athletes, you know, in the state of Oklahoma. I think if you look back over the last 4 years, it's been a pretty good run for the state of Oklahoma. They were bound to have a down year. Like, it was just bound to happen. Nobody really thought it would be that bad because you had David Stone kind of leading the way in 2024, and then he leaves. So now if he ever comes back to the state of Oklahoma and finishes his career up like at Del City or something like that, which I think might be a potential possibility down the road. I mean, I don't know for sure. I'm just guessing. Look, if that happens, then yeah, now you're talking. Now you've got some swag in that 2024 class, but right now it's just not what everybody's used to seeing. And I mean, when you look at a guy like you said, Markell Johnson, he doesn't have a lot of people looking at him right now, and he's a 6'3", 205-pound defensive back, safety, athlete that can run and can move and really covers a lot of ground, plays quarterback, wide receiver, defensive back, linebacker, safety. I mean, does all kinds of things for Edmond Memorial, and he doesn't have any offers yet, but he's a guy that probably will have a lot. That's how deep this 2023 class is in the state of Oklahoma. It's a lot like 2022. It's very deep. They just need a lot of, like, 2024 just doesn't have it. I don't know what else to say. Anyways, are you got more on the recruiting trail? Are you pretty much done for right now? Or
well, I'm trying to think. A lot of the same points that, or a lot of the same notes that we're hashing out this week, or that it makes sense to hash out this week, were things we already touched on last week. I'm trying to think what has transpired. I was at the Under Armour camp this weekend. We need to hit on that because, folks, PJ Adebawore is going to be an absolute monster of a football player. I can see that dude being a top 100 player in the country when all is said and done in the class of 2023. I mean, he blew people away at the Under Armour camp in Kansas City this past Sunday. And that's not one guy talking. I was standing there pretty much the entirety of the camp with Ryan Wallace, who runs the Kansas State site on 24/7 Sports, with Michael Swain, who runs the Kansas site, and with our Midwest region recruiting analyst, Alan True. I mean, everybody's jaw was on the floor watching PJ Adebawore move, watching him in one-on-ones. He came away as the alpha dog, Brandon, at a camp that included several other elite prospects from around the country and from around the region, most notably 5-star edge rusher Sean Davian Bradley. And that's not to take anything away from Bradley either, because he was outstanding. I'd only ever seen him in a game environment, never in an elite camp environment. And so that was maybe the one reservation I had about Bradley, was I wanted to see if the tools that he displayed on Friday nights translated against elite competition in one-on-ones. And they do. I can see why he's a 5-star. And that's one that I think we're going to look back on in a few years and wonder why it was that Oklahoma didn't move on Sean Davian Bradley, especially with all the momentum that they had accumulated under the previous staff. But that aside, PJ Adebawore was probably the most impressive overall performer. That's why he ended up with Alpha Dog honors. I was really impressed with Caden Green, whom, as I've said many a time, is very, very heavily leaning Oklahoma right now. Miles Mcvay, another guy that's booked an official with the Sooners, and I wouldn't necessarily consider the Sooners the front runner at the moment, but man, they've got more than a puncher's chance in Miles McVay's recruitment, and he moves very well for how large he is, and he is a large human being. Brandon. He is a large man, 6'6", north of 350 pounds, but he can move. And the footwork is solid. Footwork is stellar for a guy that big. Isaiah Mosey, man, that kid. And I remember talking to Caden Green last July, and Caden sat me down and said, man, we got a kid coming up who's going to play this year as a freshman on varsity. He's class of 2025. He might end up being the best prospect that's ever come through here. And to a certain extent, I was just like, okay, yeah, right. You know, like I'm sitting here talking to a top 100 national recruit, and he's telling me, yeah, I got a teammate who nobody's even heard of yet, but he's going to be the best prospect that's ever come through this region. I'm thinking, yeah, okay. Taking it all with several grains of salt. But man, whenever I got up to see a Lee Summit North game, and I think I watched 3 of their games this past fall, Isaiah Mosey was that dude. And he was there were 2 separate occasions where I showed up after the game had started. So I show up midway through the first half. And on those 2 occasions, I kid you not, within 30 seconds, Isaiah Mosey reels in a 50-plus yard touchdown.
Wow.
And so he's like, you could just tell. And watching him, you would never guess he was only 14 years old at the time. He just turned 15 in February. And he won wide receiver MVP honors on Sunday on a field where you had pass catchers like Jeremiah Love, Jeremiah McClellan, Jaden Doss. I mean, you have blue chip talent, guys that are 17 and 18 years old and have offers from high-end P5 schools all across the country. And all of them got outperformed by Isaiah Mosey. I mean, that's, and I want
to tell everybody that, they can go watch what you have on this camp at our YouTube channel, OU Insider on 247 Sports, right? Is that what it is? OU Insider on 247 Sports. Like, you can go look at at Parker's video. He's cut it up. He's got the names of everybody. You can watch them during one-on-ones. You can watch, everything, the one-on-ones and best, one-on-ones at the receiver position, the defense, offensive line. Like it's really good stuff. So if you want to see what he's talking about, go there. That's all I wanted to say. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. And look, man, I can't even begin to tell y'all how fortunate it is that Oklahoma just so happens to have the familial connection there with Isaiah Mosey, whose father, Jamar, was
crazy.
On the 2000 national championship team. And Jamar has maintained his loyalty to the Sooners over the years. Isaiah grew up a huge Sooner fan. Make no mistake, folks, OU is squarely in the driver's seat as soon as they offer the kid. And I believe he will be a 5-star in 2025 and has the potential to be an upper echelon 5-star. That is the type of kid that can go down as one of the legends in your program's history. And I don't want to put too much on a 15-year-old kid right now, but what's going to be really intriguing for me over the next 3 years is how much Isaiah Mosey grows, because just looking at him, I think he's got another inch or 2 to grow. It doesn't seem like he's done growing, but also to just see how he develops physically and to see how much better he becomes at his craft, because he's already so good that, like, I mean, it's not far-fetched to think that he could go play college football today and be a pretty solid contributor.
This is Parker's man crush, by the way. Like,
you let him grow, you let him develop over the next 3 years at Lee Summit North, which is a high school that's going to produce a wealth of Power 5 talent over the next few years. I haven't even touched on Williams Nwaneri yet, the 2024 4-star defensive lineman who was the defensive line MVP. So between Nwaneri, Caden Green, and Isaiah Mosey, Lee Summit North has 3 guys in 3 consecutive classes that are all going to end up being, at the very least, top 150 guys. And at the most,
3 for 3.
Yeah, but they very well could go 3 for 3. That's the thing, because I like where they sit with Green. I like where they sit with Mosey even right now. Nwaneri is kind of the question mark. And they haven't offered yet. I think that offer will come. OU's very aware of Williams Nwaneri. They're going to continue to monitor him. I think the holdup right now is that they're in the lead right now for the top 4 defensive linemen in the entire class of 2024. So I understand why he doesn't have the offer yet. I think it will eventually come. And I think that's another guy that could be an all-conference type of player. He's got that kind of ceiling for Oklahoma in the long term. But yeah, man, I'm so impressed by Mosey in particular, because to see what he did a couple of months removed from his 15th birthday, like, it's not hard to pinpoint special dudes when you see him. And he is a special dude. You know, they're just guys at these camps that stand head and shoulders above the rest. You and I were there in Dallas watching David Hicks, Brandon, and that dude just stands head and shoulders above the rest. It's like he's a different species than everybody else on the field. There's nobody that can touch him. And I think Mosey's going to be that type of player ultimately. Last guy I want to mention that really stood out at the camp and that earned his All-American game invite was Dylan Edwards, who was at Oklahoma this past Friday and is going to be right back before the end of the month, I would guess, probably for the spring game, though he hasn't set an official date yet. Dylan Edwards really impressed me as a receiver. And I know the speed is what everybody gets excited about with Edwards, and for good reason. But he is so dexterous and so fluid as a receiver. There was one play, and I wrote about it on OUinsider.com VIP, but the one play that really, really impressed me as he was taking one-on-one reps against the linebackers and catching passes was he beat his man. He had a couple steps on him down the seam running a wheel route, and the ball was underthrown and had quite a bit of loft on it. And so what Dylan Edwards did is, he's 5'7", tops. So he's not going to go win a jump ball. That's never going to be his game. But what he did was he instantly recognized that the ball was going to be underthrown. He slowed down, intentionally decelerated to keep the defender on his hip, and then at the last second reaccelerates to catch the ball smoothly, and the defender never has a chance to interfere with the pass. That's the type of next level play that really, really impresses me about Dylan Edwards, because he is so attentive to the minute details of the game. And he kind of has to be to a certain extent, right? Because he's a head shorter than everybody else. That's just how it is. And that's the hand he's been dealt. And he can make up for it because of the way that he plays the game and because of his God-given speed, which is elite, truly elite. And that is what sets him apart at the high school level. And that is what will set him apart at the collegiate level. I am buying stock on Dylan Edwards, and I understand the reservations that some folks have about him. I am buying stock on him. I believe he can be a high-end contributor for whatever collegiate program he ends up committing to. And I think right now you have to consider the Sooners the leader in the clubhouse. There is some love for Kansas State there. He's kind of waiting on an A&M offer. Maybe. I'm not entirely convinced that'll come, but we'll see. Washington, Wisconsin, they're in play. He wants to visit both those programs, but certainly is a good sign when he's already planning on making his third visit to Oklahoma in as many months.
Yeah, is he ever going to commit? I mean, does Edwards ever commit to Oklahoma? I mean, I think that's the big question everybody wants to ask. So, I mean, do you think he eventually just says, you know what, screw it, I'm just going to get this over with? I mean, eventually he does, obviously.
Yeah,
but I mean within do you think he does it if he visits in spring game? Do you think Edwards just goes ahead and just says, hey,
No, I don't, because I think he's enjoying the process, and I think he wants to take his officials, which is understandable.
Okay. Fair enough. Well, I think we've gone long enough. I think we've gone long enough. We can discuss the draft on the next one. And I think everybody's kind of aware what's going on with the basketball stuff, because we've discussed that on the YouTube Live. If you want to see that, you can go to, again, OU Insider on 247 Sports YouTube. And there's the YouTube live that we do there each Monday at 8 p.m. You can go rehash it. It's streamed live. Make sure you do go see us and watch that every Monday at 8 p.m. because we answer your questions. Like we do similar thing to this, but then we go through and answer questions that you guys have for us. But you can also go and ask us questions on OU Insider VIP. If you're not a member right now, $75 gets you 1 year. You can get the spring stuff. You can get all the visit stuff. You can get all the recruiting knickknacks that we're going to throw out there, the notes. You get the team information that we're going to throw out there. There's a lot of team stuff that we're going to dive into over the next few months, particularly throughout the rest of the spring and summer, leading into the fall with team notes and behind the scenes stuff. We're also going to be seeing a lot of camps this summer where there's going to be there will be a lot of commits happening between now and August. So I think people need to, if you're not on board, get on board right now. And you can also get Paramount Plus if you join us right now if you join us right now, you get Paramount Plus. It's along with that 1 year, $75. And then, or if you don't want to do that, you can go $1 for the first month, $9.95 afterwards. If you want to go month to month, we would love to have you. We're growing at a fast rate. We just talked to our boss earlier today. We're still exceedingly, we're growing at an exceeding rate. And we actually cannot, and I say it every podcast, and I truly, truly mean it, Parker, and I cannot thank you enough for what you guys do for us. You Sooners fans make OU Insider go. If you guys weren't creating all the clicks, if you guys weren't visiting us, if you weren't signing up, we wouldn't be employed. We wouldn't be doing this that we're doing right now. And we cannot thank you enough. We feel blessed to be able to do what we're doing. And we want to thank you guys. And for that, we're going to start doing giveaways again. Starting this summer, I'm going to start doing $100, $200 giveaways, stuff like that, giving prizes away, all kinds of stuff for you guys. And then during the season, we give tickets away for our members. You have to be a VIP member for all these giveaways. We start doing giveaways for tickets for home games. And so last year, I think we gave up 20 home game tickets throughout the whole season. There was one game we gave 12 away. So we had a whole row that was nothing but OU Insider VIP members. And that was really cool. So hopefully you guys will join us. We hope to see you there. Parker, do you have anything else?
Oh,
I think you're muted, buddy.
My mic was muted somehow. I got nothing else. Looking forward to the spring game. Looking forward to continuing to bring you guys insider team and recruiting intel over the next couple of weeks as we conclude spring ball here in the state of Oklahoma and in particular at the University of Oklahoma. So, it's almost midnight. So let's call it a wrap and we'll do it again next week.
Yep. All right, guys and ladies. For Parker Thune, my name is Brandon Drumm. Thank you guys so much for listening to this version of the OU Insider Under the Visor podcast. You guys have a blessed night.